designing functional programs. I'm sure you've been dabbling with functional programming, you're writing code with functional style, and you're enjoying lambdas, you're enjoying streams, and all those beautiful techniques. But there is one unanswered question. How in the world do we design applications with functional programming? Well, it turns out it's not just about coding. Well, sure, I can take a loop and rewrite it using functional style, using internal iterators. But there are issues like, how do I deal with immutability? Is it practical to develop applications with immutability? How do you deal with exceptions? Where do you generate exceptions? Where do you handle exceptions? How do you go about designing applications where functional style of programming goes from, this is great, to, oh my gosh, how do I make this darn thing to work? Well, things like exception handling can be really hard to deal with if we don't rethink about how we approach the design of applications. So it turns out coding in functional style is not just about rewiring your loops into internal iterator. It's a lot more than that. We need to step back and rethink about how to approach design, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in the presentation on designing functional applications. Because if you're building applications where you're beginning to make use of functional style of programming, to step back and rethink about the design concerns and take a step back and say, we're not going to go that route just to refactor the code to functional style, but we're going to take a holistic approach and say, how do we really go through and set up the exception handling process? How do we then generate the exception and go downstream to handle it? How do we go about working with immutability? How do we structure the application? How do we architect it so that there are impure parts on the sides and pure parts in the center? What are the benefits of doing it? What are some of the constraints? How do we take our current approaches in building architecture and systems in the imperative style and then rethink about it in building with functional style? That's what we're going to focus on. It's not just going to be theory. I'm going to talk about design, but I'll also show application examples where we're going to employ some of these things. So when you leave, you not only know about how to do it, but you'll also know how it feels to create it at the code level as well. That's what I'm going to focus on in designing functional programs.